Welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. My name is Sam Thurston from National Laboratory, electrical engineer, and the project lead for the NextGen Profiles project. Okay, so as Andrew broke down, the NextGen Profiles project placed within the EVs at Scale Consortium. So we are a project under the high power charging pillar. And to kind of describe the goals of this project within a mission statement, I suppose, from our procedures document is to further understand the most recent technological capabilities of the electric mobility industry related to charging performance. And so with a specific interest in high power charging being DC power above 200 kilowatts. And so there's a lot of different things you need to take in consideration or factor into when assessing high power charging. Some of that may be nominal versus off nominal conditions for when you're starting a charge, conductive and non-conductive equipment, assessing the performance and differences between the two, system responses to grid disturbances, as well as smart charge management, and unique and thoughtful methods of assessing the performance from the data that you've collected. And so within NextGen Profiles, there's 3 categories. I'm looking to touch on each of those today. The first being EV profile capture, the second EVSE characterization, and the third is fleet utilization. And I'll dive a little bit more deeper into the specifics of each of those in the coming slides. So taking a look at our project timeline, this is recently updated. It's a bit of a busy slide, but essentially this has been a 5-year project so far. It wasn't until year 2, fiscal year 2022, that we integrated into the EVs at Scale Consortium. And so a quick run through of our timeline and where we're heading. In year 1 was our kind of gathering our plans for the upcoming years. So that was solidifying collaborator agreements, building our procedures documents, getting feedback on that document, and as well targeting assets and OEM relationships. Then once we were able to finalize those procedures, we moved into year 2, where we were gathering some initial fleet data. We were running charge profiles, building our DAC systems, and then continuing that into year 3 as well, conducting all our different boundary conditions of EV profile capture, EVSE characterization, and fleet analysis. And then at the end of year 3, which was fiscal year 2023, we were able to produce some final reports for each of the different pillars, and as well an overarching high-level analysis report. And then into year 4 now, which is where that red arrow was pointing, we're looking to, and in the process of refining our testing procedures. We had a bit of a scope revision in Q3 of our 3rd year, where we were looking at how things have changed over the past couple of years and seeing what we could add into the scope of our project. And so based on those additions, we decided we needed a procedures revision. So that scope was added in. That document is mostly finished, but we are looking for some feedback, which I'll look a bit more into in these next slides. So those 2 highlighted in red, the analysis and reporting and the procedures, are 2 things I want to hit home a little more in depth. But I guess before that, moving forward for year 4, what are our plans for the rest of the year? We're looking to continue our data acquisition. We're looking to continue charge profiles, EVC characterization, add more fleets to our portfolio, and create a new set of reports at the end of this calendar year. And then in year 5, again, we're looking to expand our scope and produce a final set of reports, kind of amending and upgrading what we have already previously done. So looking at our procedures revision, I'd like to start off by saying that very shortly after this consortium or this semi-annual meeting, there'll be some outreach where we'll send along our revised test procedures documents. Similar to year 1, we're looking for some input on those revisions, where we will highlight some of those changes. Some major changes being within EV profile capture. We're including boost converter testing, DC boost converter for different voltage system topologies, EVSE power limited testing, adapter testing. As well, we are updating some of our vehicle measurement locations and a minor inclusion of the megawatt charging systems, looking for future incorporation. And EVSE characterization, we have recently included V to G into our scope. So we put together some procedures for that, and then fleet utilization included a cohesive and extensive metrics list for all the parameters we're capturing for the charging, routing, and other metrics. And as well as some final touches on data dissemination, the 3 different types. So that will be passed along very shortly to our email mailing list for those who have expressed interest in the NextGen Profiles project. And there will be an open revision period until the end of March. So that is our procedures for our reporting. So our end of year 3 reports have been completed. As you've seen, as John mentioned, we have some of those reports here today. Those include the high level analysis, which gives an overarching project, goals, procedures, et cetera. And then 3 technical reports, one for EV profile capture, one for EVSE characterization, and one for fleet utilization. These 4 reports contain very detailed analysis on our specific pillar procedures and as well fully anonymized analysis on all of our assets. And I'd really here like to emphasize the how the NextGen Profiles project really operates well with collaboration from OEMs and participation. And so we can't really do what we do without that relationship between industry. And so I'd like to emphasize what it is the industry gets for participating in the NextGen Profiles project, and whether that's through donating assets, fleet data, et cetera. By being a part of this project, those OEMs are receiving 10 hertz time series data on their assets, how it performed on our equipment. So 10 hertz time series for EV profile, that could be grid side and vehicle side data. Also receiving anonymized lower cadence time series for non-sponsored assets. As well, you're able to see and be included in this report how your assets are comparing against our wide portfolio under our various test conditions. And as well, you get to be included in a large state-of-the-art study during the EV charging's most evolutionary period. So it's very, who wouldn't want to be part of it? So yeah, that's a summary on our reports. And some of them are available online. We're working to get the others on there very shortly. But a further update will come on that. Okay. Now let's dive into the more technical results. So I'd like to take some of the findings from those reports and speak on them here just a little bit. Obviously, you can get a lot more detail in the reports, but just what to expect, I guess. Let's start with EV profile capture. So a general overview, what are we testing? We're testing production EVs rated at from 150 to 400 kilowatts DC charging. We're testing those on production EVSEs rated from 500 amps, typically is the highest we're getting so far with CCS type 1. And typically a dual cabinet topology, multiple handle types. And we have 2 different, I guess, categories of testing, either nominal or off nominal. Nominal testing is standardly defined 10 to 100% nominal weather conditions, 23 degrees Celsius, and pre-driven on a 30 to 40-minute drive cycle to kind of emulate the most typical on-demand DC fast charging driving experience. And then we have our off-nominal test conditions, which explores different state of charge. It explores different temperature conditions. As well, we have our soaked versus preconditioned states. And then we're looking at smart charge management, most CPP curtailment response, single cabinet EVSE limited conditions, boost converters, as I mentioned, and as well as some wireless power transfer tests as well. And on the right there, I guess for our photos, you can see some of our test equipment, our topology, and then a full list of our test cases. So diving into some of the results, the first category for EV profile capture I'd like to emphasize is comparing EV performance. And so the goal of this is to capture the diversity of charge profiles under similar conditions. So all the profiles and data you can see here were all compared and collected at those nominal starting conditions, 10 to 100% nominal preconditioned. And this is for all 13 of the EV assets that were included in our portfolio, 11 of which were light duty, 2 were heavy duty vehicles. You can see right at a snapshot, these are power versus time plots. And something that's very obvious is how unique these curves are. The Constant current versus constant voltage zones vary. The number of plateaus per vehicle vary. So a lot of different interesting and unique charging control strategies across vehicle to vehicle. We're also looking at the ratio between max power and average power. A lot of vehicles prioritize a lot of high power early stages to achieve that 10 to 80% charge time. And that could mean sacrificing the second half of that. So the 80 to 100% sees a lot of fall off. And so very interesting and different charge strategies depending on the goals of OEMs. So we're exploring some of that from the power perspective. We're also taking a look at more EV driver metrics. So examining state of charge, range, and energy charged. And what's really interesting about this comparison is how different the top performers vary depending on the slight variation in your goals. And so emphasizing this, I've highlighted a couple of top performing EVs. So the first graph in blue is a 10 to 100%, or they're all 10 to 100%, but the goal here is time to 80% state of charge. And here we have EV11 as a top performer of these three. And then you change the metric to time to 200 miles gained. And then you have EV1 as your new reigning champion of these three. Then you flip it a little bit. And now instead of setting the metric as your goal, you're setting a time. So after 10 minutes, how much range did you gain? After 10 minutes, how much SOC did you gain? And so these slight variations in your performance goals and metrics really changes around who is the top performer. You can see this variability through marketing of EV performance, like 15-minute charge time to 80 or gain 200 miles in 10 minutes. You know, it's very, very different across the board. And so something we're looking to do in this new set of reports is harmonization with some more standards. So I know SAE 2953/4 has some of these standardized performance comparisons. And so we're looking to incorporate some of those into our results. So a lot of different interesting findings, just comparing EVs at the same starting condition. We also have some more detailed graphical and tabular results, which gets down to the nitty gritty, but we're trying our best to keep that as anonymized as possible, non-identifying, but yeah. This is the first area of performance we're looking at. Next, EV portfolios. This is something you'll find in the appendix section of the EV profile capture report. There's one for each vehicle. So these are detailed portfolios or data sheets, I guess, where we're looking at in the first page, how this asset compares against the full portfolio, highlighting its only plots, as well as we're looking at some distribution for power. And then at the bottom, some tabular results on all the different boundary conditions it went through. And then on the page 2, you can see some more detailed boundary conditions because we really wanted to capture or showcase all the different testing that we did for each vehicle and have somewhere for it to be highlighted. So these are acting as kind of references. If you see a singular vehicle throughout the written portion of the report that takes interest, you have a detailed portfolio to reference that. And so these are just two vehicles that I chose to highlight, and the difference in between the two of them. We have a above 500 volt vehicle and a below 500 volt battery topology. What's very interesting and specific is the power distribution pie chart. And so you can see that EV2 is able to achieve, I think, a peak power of around above 250 kilowatts, but more than 75% of the charge time is spent below 50 kilowatts versus EV3, a vehicle that's only able to, I think, peak at around 150 kilowatts, but it's spending close to 66% of its time in that higher power zone. So very different control strategies, very different goals, a lot of uniqueness from vehicle to vehicle. And that's something that's highlighted within the profile report. And so we're also looking to expand this for our next set. Okay, and the last thing I'll touch on for EV profile capture is grid utilization. Something we wanted to incorporate moving forward is integrating our EV charge profiles into some grid modeling and simulation. We have actual real world charging data, 10 hertz, 10 samples per second. Can we actually use this in some of our models? And so all three labs, ANL, INL, and NREL, are incorporating some charge profiles into their own models. So from ANL, we have our IEEE HIL grid model, which we are working on at the moment. INL is looking to incorporate some profiles into their Caldera simulation platform, and NREL is looking to incorporate into their EVIX modeling suite. And so what kind of progress are we looking at so far? We've been able to integrate some profiles into models, perform some statistical analysis of real world start and end SOCs, model and set up megawatt charging sites within the model, design some mixed use cases as well for fleet versus public charging, and continually performing these grid impact studies. So one big emphasis for this as well, for the April deep dive that John mentioned and Andrew mentioned, is that for NextGen Profiles, we're diving a lot deeper into this specifically, into grid utilization. We've had some in the past about EV profiles, EVC characterization, and fleet, but we'd really like to dive a little bit deeper into this because it's really interesting work, and there's a lot more to expand upon. So yeah, that's all I have right now for EV profile capture. But let's take a look a little bit more into EVSE characterization. So similar to EV profile capture in the sense that this is 10 Hertz time series data. However, this is on an EV emulator. Still using production EVSE assets, but we really want to characterize the charger at different voltage and current levels. And so for nominal test conditions, we're exploring 300 through 850 volts, doing current increments from 50 to 500 amps, nominal temperature and nominal grid supply of 480, 60 Hertz, no harmonics. But then in the off nominal test conditions, we are doing some distortion for the voltage injection for the frequency and as well harmonics, looking at some of that distortion, and as well, we're exploring different temperature conditions and some smart charge management as well. So that's mostly just for the conductive EVSE characterization. For non-conductive, for wireless power transfer, some of the off-nominal conditions come with alignment, the X, Y, and Z alignments, offsets. And as I mentioned earlier, we are starting to incorporate V to G into our scope for EVSE. And similarly, we have some of our test conditions listed on the left there. Okay. Taking a look at some of our findings from EVSE characterization. Two things highlighting here is nominal conductive and nominal non-conductive results. So the first, for conductive, we're looking to characterize conductive charging performance and operation across a wide range of voltage and current test conditions. We're able to gather some really interesting findings when it comes to system efficiencies, power factors, some of losses across the system. And for the non-conductive systems, we similarly are performing across a wide range of voltage and current test conditions and offsets. We are able to test the different resistive loads, different battery voltages as well, which all yielded different efficiencies. And there's also some more further detailed results on electric, electromagnetic field emissions, and a lot more incorporated in that detailed report. And so one more area of results for EVSE characterization is some off-nominal testing. So these are some further results for what I mentioned, those voltage, frequency, and harmonics deviation. So for each of them, we were exploring, I think, a 90 to 110% off nominal. And basically, for most of them, we saw a less than 2% deviation when it came to current ripple, except there was notably a bit more of a variance for the 5% harmonics injection, getting to peaks as high as 14% and 5% for those 850 volt systems. But for the most part, they all continued uninterrupted during the off nominal and matched the expected behavior. So that's some off nominal testing. And the other one I wanted to highlight here, very interesting case, is the high utilization testing. So this is kind of our back-to-back-to-back tests. 3 10-minute charge sessions with 4-minute rests in between to see the system response to those, to see if the requested DC current could remain. You can see in the plot there in the lower that it was initially requesting, I believe, around 450 amps. And as that CCS cable and connector temperature is starting to rise in these successive charge sessions. It's no longer able to meet that requested current. So it's a really good test to examine the thermal capabilities of these chargers and kind of emulates a typical use case for public charging infrastructure, back-to-back charging, et cetera. Okay. And so the last thing I will touch on here is the fleet utilization. This is a little more unique to the first two categories because it's not 10 hertz time series data anymore, and we're not collecting the data ourselves. And so this category is heavily reliant on OEM relations. What we're doing is getting access to fleet data from OEMs and conducting that analysis in post. So we can do some really cool and unique things with that. So far, we've categorized it into charging, routing, and further time analysis, and vary based on the type of data we're getting and the access to such, how long the fleet's been operating for, et cetera. But we're able to do annual analysis, monthly, weekly, daily, hourly, averages or full totals if you want to see the trend across the year, or get a snapshot of here is what an average week looks like based on 2 years of operation. We're able to do that with our adaptable code base. We're looking at utilization rates, average start and end SOCs, average power, weekly utilization rates, et cetera. And yeah, these scripts are highly flexible, and we're looking to increase their adaptability moving forward, get more fleets involved, and yeah, it gives us insight to specifically how these fleets are operating on day-to-day operations. With the EV/EVSE, we're able to see the limits of their capabilities across different boundary conditions, but we also really wanted to see how they are in action. So some initial results from that, we were able to get access to 4 fleets for this round of analysis, 1 EV fleet and 3 EVSE fleets. Obviously for the EV fleets, we're able to get charging and routing data. For EVSE, it's just charging, but still some comparison can be done across the two. For this one, we're looking at averaged total energy charged for a full year's worth of data averaged into a single week. And so you can see it's a little difficult to see based on the up and down nature of a full week, but there's quite a bit of variation across each fleet. Notably, EVSE Fleet 3, it doesn't have as much charging in the early mornings and nights versus EV Fleet 1. Across the board, it's pretty much always in use. And so this data is gathered at a 60-second cadence, rolled up to hourly for our time series data. These averages were calculated Sunday to Saturday, and yeah, a lot of unique charge behaviors. And so this is just a sample of what is possible with our code base with the fleet analysis. And so very similar analysis can be done for other metrics and similarly for other timescales. And so a lot more of this type of data can be seen in the fleet utilization paper. And that's really all I had for results for the 3 different pillars. Just to conclude, some final touch points. So thus far, what we've collected so far has been very insightful. There's a lot of really good data in there and a lot of great work from all the lab members, ANL, INL, NREL, and Oak Ridge. Moving forward, we're looking to increase our scope, continue to gather more assets, and do more further analysis. Gather a lot of feedback from industry on our current reports, how to make those maybe more valuable, and what specifically you're looking for out of these type of analysis. And so these reports are mostly EERE published, mostly available on DOE, OSTI. It won't be long until they're all up there. Procedure revision open till the April 1st, which will be sent out very shortly. And OEMs interested in participating, reach out to my email, Thurston@anl.gov, or anyone on the NextGen Profiles or EVs at Scale team. We'd love to have you a part of the project. It's really cool, really fun. And we're able to get some really good data. And so that's all I had. Thank you guys for letting me touch on it today. Yeah, I did have a whole EV question. So this question's catered around just some input from industry. What would you like to see from us moving forward? I don't think it'll come up until. Sorry, yeah. So yeah, what would make NextGen Profiles work more impactful for industry? Is it more EVs, more EVSEs, more fleets? Should we expand our testing rigor or expand our analysis, or any further input is great.
And while you guys fill this out, I will emphasize Sam's ask for more input on procedures updates. We really do want your input for that. So overlap between ChargeX and the NextGen Profiles specifically. So I would say that the ChargeX team is primarily focused on fixing reliability or helping improve reliability and performance. I think that ChargeX team is looking at the data that we get for this to help inform some of our decisions. We've also, I'm sure those of you who have installed charging infrastructure have run into some reliability challenges. And so the NextGen team has graciously been helping the ChargeX team with on-site input as to the equipment that we've been operating. So they've definitely got some direct feedback from that, and some of the lessons learned from us trying to get our charging equipment up and running has been formed into the ChargeX team. So there's definitely been some good crossover between the two, but the direct participation with the profiles, I think maybe the closest that comes to is, I would say, the KPI activities. John's giving me the thumbs up, so I did a good job. Thanks, Ted. All right, we'll go questions. I see one from David.
Hey, Sam, great work. What I was thinking about is if you have any way that you could test like derating of DC chargers. So I know Barney in the past has done things like cover the intake of the cabinets, things like that, but seeing situations where users might come and for some reason it's charging at a lower rate. I know that's one of the things that's kind of interesting, maybe even the ChargeX, but if you have any like test plans for that or thoughts about that. It's really device specific, so it becomes a bit harder to standardize, but just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to be pretty familiar with the equipment we have on hand. It's a great use case, and something we recognize as well is, it's really interesting to see how these assets perform under their best conditions, but very typically how well do they operate when power is curtailed. And so we're able to do that through some tech mode, kind of EV or power current limitations, or if that's not accessible, we also have OCPP curtailment for curtailing power for a lengthy amount of time. So that's how we're able to run those charge sessions. And yeah, very interesting findings on that. Thanks, David.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for the great presentation. It is really interesting to see this kind of variation with different vehicles, different EVCE. So I was wondering if you guys have a close look, why is this happening? Is it like because of like battery cell? Is it because of the BMS? Is it because maybe battery health? I was wondering if you share this information with the OEM. Have you looked at something like that?
Yeah, so why is there so much variance due to temperature and the seasonal effects? Yeah, there's obviously a lot of factors. One primarily is battery temperature. The battery chemistry of those does require some of those cells to be a little bit warmer if you want to achieve top performance for a charge flow. And so especially in those colder weather conditions, when your starting temperature is very low, you see a much more curtailed power than what is rated for the vehicle. That's one very easily impactful effect, but the other, of course, is state of charge. If you start a charge at 60% SOC, you're not going to get the full rated power as well. You really see that at the lower of the 10% and the 25%. So that's why we set up our test cases to be 10, 25, and 50. Could be argued that maybe above 50 would emphasize that a little more. Then it seems a little more atypical. So that's what we move forward with. But yeah, those are the two main.
A lot of those are life impacts for the batteries. So lithium plating at cold and then high fast charge rates at higher SOCs is why we believe that's happening.
Yeah.
Quick question. Have you approached the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation regarding the NEVI data sets that are soon coming off of those stations? And the second question is, have you asked sort of the stakeholders, what would be the highest value of of information. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, you presented their milliseconds or, 10 hertz data sets, but then you also presented sort of hourly load profiles. And so I would be very interested to hear, what the stakeholders think about what is the highest value.
Right. To answer the first question, have we dove into the NEVI data? So far for NextGen Profiles, we haven't looked at any NEVI data yet. I think there's maybe some opportunity for some fleet data there. Obviously, the NEVI program is relatively new and these new sites have launched pretty recently. So in comparison to some of our previous fleets where we have full years and months worth of data, there might not be as much, but it's certainly something to look into. In terms of the reliability side of things, we're not really exploring that with the NextGen Profiles, which I know NEVI requirements is also heavily emphasizing, is upkeep time and must meet power requirements. And I know that's something that ChargeX is interested in. But yeah, I think so far with NextGen, we haven't yet, but interested in that. And the second question was, what is most valuable to stakeholders in terms of data? So 10 hertz data. I think there was during our procedures initial revision, we had came up with this sort of pitch, I guess, of we're thinking of collecting data, 10 hertz. Any input on that is a lower, higher cadence, more valuable. I know in some of our previous presentations for the last semi-annual meeting, we had discussed and opened the conversation for, would this data be valuable to be posted somewhere at a lower cadence? I think there was some interest even at a 1 minute roll up for that to be posted. So we're not sure yet where we want to post all of this data. It's a lot of profile data and at what cadence, but there's certainly an opportunity for a roll up.
Will you do sort of a survey, really methodological, systematic approach that really scan the landscape of what the needs are?
Yeah, it's something we can definitely do. Yeah, get some input from industry. It's what drives a project. So I think that'd be great.
Yeah, and I think the joint office activity you're talking about for the data, I believe that goes in the EV chart, if I'm not mistaken, is the name for that. I don't know. One of the joint office colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah.
I'll just put, oh wait, sorry. Well, I have one more question. This is kind of a shameless ask here, but open question. Please provide your email if interested in participation. I know it'd be great to just have a working list of anyone that's interested, and I think that'll get sent right to me and then be part of that mailing list. So opportunity here to provide an email, whether it's you or a colleague that you think might be interested, and then we can add you to our mailing list and keep you in the loop for any updates.
So while that ticks up, were there any questions? Any final questions? Ted, can always count on you for a good question.
So Murphy says things don't go as planned. What was the biggest unexpected, either outcome positive or negative, on what you didn't expect to see?
Yeah, I guess coming in, I was relatively fresh to EV charging and relatively unfamiliar. I didn't expect how reliant vehicle preconditioning is for the vehicle to achieve top power, and how for some vehicles that window is very slim to achieve the rated peak power. Others, it's very loose. You can achieve that top power in cold weather, cold soak, but it's very difficult to achieve the rated power for some vehicles, and that was unexpected for me. Yeah, certainly.
One last quick question related to what some people said earlier, but about cold temperatures. I noticed your coldest was what, 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I wondered if you were also planning maybe in the future to do tests down to like negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, especially with, I know stories in the media with Chicago, I think it was. I know up in Idaho, we sometimes get temperatures down that cold. It'd be interesting to see some studies that show how the charging is affected by that.
No, that's a great point. So we are at the mercy of weather for Chicago and Golden, Colorado. Lucky for us, we live in these cities that get very cold, and we can do cold weather testing. Maybe with the addition of thermal chamber or something like that, we're able to achieve that. But for negative 20, it's maybe 1 or 2 days a year that we get those. And so even with our cold charge sessions now, we really have to capitalize on those cold weathers, but certainly something we can explore later, further down the line.
Hi, good morning. John Holmes from Honda. Thank you so much. 3 great presentations. I really do appreciate, and I'd like to tie this together with a future-looking subject area, which is aggregation. How is it that the aggregators who are now trying to coordinate these charging sessions on behalf of the customer and on behalf of the utility could be integrated into this work?
Yeah, and that's a great question. How to aggregate between, I guess, OEMs and consumers, I think was the question. So that's something we're really trying to emphasize through our work, is that we're trying to write our reports for multiple audiences. You know, there's different technical levels for all readers. And so we want to provide useful grid data. We want to provide good DC power data. And we also want to provide EV driver performance metrics, kind of relating all 3 together, because it is a cohesive relationship between the 3, those making the cars, those charging them, and those buying them. So we want to kind of cater our results for all 3 audiences. In terms of moving forward, I guess that relationship between us and OEMs, we are able to provide more custom, more detailed feedback on their vehicle's performance if we have the OEM relationship for the assets that they provide us. And that's an added benefit. You know, we have really great data, and we have really great customized scripts that can get unique plots. So if there's anything specific that OEMs are looking for in terms of analysis that we're capable of getting from our data set, we're open to do that and provide them that feedback.
So just a quick point around like utility aggregation. I think you're talking about like smart charge management, vehicle grid integration. There are some discussions that'll happen in the Fuse discussion later today around some of the data we're collecting at Argonne and NREL. So we'll get into that later.